Hello, and welcome to Sword Drills of the Spirit. Today is day 156 of our journey together as we are reading through the Bible in a year. We've gone quite a way, and we're actually into the July of our Bible reading plan, even though I'm recording this in June, so we've made some headway. The plan is designed, of course, to have 5 days off per month, so I know there's plenty of people that are taking advantage of that and spacing this out within their week, whether they're only watching for 6 days a week or they're taking those days off when they need them, and that's great. So we're going to continue to do that. I pray that whenever it is that you're watching this, that you're fully engaged, that you're excited to do this, and that you're getting a lot out of it. I know that I am for sure. Okay, so before we jump into the Bible today and our reading, let's open up in a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you so much for how much you love us and are watching over us, and how much you are blessing us. I pray that as we read your word today, that you would open it up to us, that you would just open our hearts and minds to understand what it is we're reading, to engage with the characters we're reading about these men and women of history, and so we understand who they were and why they were doing what they were doing, and we can learn the lessons from them. And at the same time, we can learn directly from your teachings in the Gospels and the teachings of the apostles in the epistles. We thank you so much for your wonderful grace. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, so let's start. We're going to start in 1 Chronicles chapters 12 through 14 today. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, we're going to pick up in the story of David's reign. So we're once again going over the story of David in Chronicles, the same way we did in Samuel. And so this is David has been established as king. Well, we've been introduced to his mighty warriors who are kind of leading his army and his kingdom. And now we're going to continue on with a description of those that were with him. So in chapter 12. The following men joined David at Ziklag while he was hiding from Saul, son of Kish. They were among the warriors who fought beside David in battle. All of them were expert archers, and they could shoot arrows or sling stones with their left hand as well as their right. They were all relatives of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Their leader was Ahiezer, son of Shammah from Gibeah. His brother Joash was second in command. It's interesting that Saul's relatives even joined David while he's still being hunted by Saul. This is the kind of charisma that David has, as well as the blessing of God. Not only blessing him with this personality and the ability to draw people to his cause, but of course, God working on their hearts to draw them to the true King of Israel. These were the other warriors: Jaziel and Pelet, sons of Asmaveth, Berka, Jehu from Anathoth, Ismaiah from Gibeon, a famous warrior and leader among the 30, Jeremiah, Jahaziel, Jehonan, and Jozabad from Gedera, Eluzai, Jeremoth, Bealiah, Sheramiah, and Shephatiah from Haraph, Elkanah, Ishiah, Azarel, Jozer, and Jashubim, who were Korahites, Joliah, and Zebediah, sons of Joram from Gedor. Some brave and experienced warriors from the tribe of Gad also defected to David while he was at the stronghold in the wilderness. They were expert with both shield and spear, as fierce as lions and as swift as deer on the mountains. Azer was their leader. Obadiah was second. Eliab was third. Mismana was fourth. Jeremiah was fifth. Attai was sixth. Eliel was seventh. Johanan was eighth. Elzabad was ninth. Jeremiah was 10th. Macbani was 11th. These warriors from Gad were army commanders. The weakest among them could take on 100 regular troops, and the strongest could take on 1,000. These were the men who crossed the Jordan River during its seasonal flooding at the beginning of the year and drove out all the people living in the lowlands on both east and west banks. Others from Benjamin and Judah came to David at the stronghold. David went out to meet them and said, "If you have come in peace to help me, we are friends. But if you have come to betray me to my enemies when I am innocent, then may the God of our ancestors see it and punish you." Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, the leader of the 30, and he said, "We are yours, David. We are on your side, son of Jesse." Peace and prosperity be with you, and success to all who help you, for your God is the one who helps you." So David let them join him, and he made them officers over his troops. Some men from Manasseh defected from the Israelite army and joined David when he set out with the Philistines to fight against Saul. But as it turned out, the Philistine rulers refused to let David and his men go with them. After much discussion, they sent them back, for they said, "It will cost us our heads if David switches loyalties to Saul and turns against us." Here is a list of the men from Manasseh who defected to David as he was returning to Ziklag: Adnah, Jozabad, Jediel, Michael, Jozabad, Elihu, and Zelathai. Each commanded 1,000 troops from the tribe of Manasseh. They helped David chase down bands of raiders, for they were all brave and able warriors who became commanders in his army. Day after day, more men joined David until he had a great army like the army of God. These are the numbers of armed warriors who joined David at Hebron. They were all eager to see David become king instead of Saul, just as the Lord had promised. From the tribe of Judah, there were 6,800 warriors armed with shields and spears. From the tribe of Simeon, there were 7,100 brave warriors. From the tribe of Levi, there were 4,600 warriors. This included Jehoiada, leader of the family of Aaron, who had 3,700 under his command. This also included Zadok, a brave young warrior with 22 members of his family who were all officers. Interestingly, some part of me thought that the tribe of Levi didn't go out and fight battles. I thought that they were all priests and served in that capacity. But here we have the leader of the family of Aaron leading an army into David's side, warriors all. From the tribe of Benjamin, Saul's relatives, there were 3,000 warriors. Most of the men from Benjamin had remained loyal to Saul until this time. From the tribe of Ephraim, there were 20,800 brave warriors, each highly respected in his own clan. From the half-tribe of Manasseh, west of the Jordan, 18,000 men were designated by name to help David become king. From the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. All these men understood the sign of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. From the tribe of Zebulun, there were 50,000 skilled warriors. They were fully armed and prepared for battle and completely loyal to David. From the tribe of Naphtali, there were 1,000 officers and 37,000 warriors, armed with shields and spears. From the tribe of Dan, there were 28,600 warriors, all prepared for battle. From the tribe of Asher, there were 40,000 trained warriors, all prepared for battle. From the east side of the Jordan River, where the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh lived, there were 120,000 troops, armed with every kind of weapon. All these men came in battle array to Hebron with a single purpose of making David the king over all Israel. In fact, everyone in Israel agreed that David should be their king. They feasted and drank with David for 3 days, for preparations had been made by their relatives for their arrival. And people from as far away as Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali brought food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen, vast supplies of flour, fig cakes, clusters of raisins, wine, olive oil, cattle, sheep, and goats were brought to the celebration. There was great joy throughout the land of Israel. All right. So David is becoming king. He isn't quite king yet. We know he was crowned at Hebron and then later conquered Jerusalem to make it his seat. And so these warriors came. It's interesting, at the beginning of the chapter they talk about the warriors coming while David was hiding from Saul. And now they're kind of talking about them making him king with that intention. And a lot of warriors, like hundreds of thousands. So at least 120,000 on the east side of the river, and many, many more around. So these are those that have chosen David over Saul. I just wonder if the timeline fits this before Saul's death or after. Because there was some trouble afterwards. Not sure. Either way, let's continue reading here. So chapter 13, we'll continue on. David consulted with all his officials, including the generals and captains of his army. Then he addressed the entire assembly of Israel as follows: If you approve, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send messages to all the Israelites throughout the land, including the priests and Levites in their towns and pasture lands. Let us invite them to come and join us. It is time to bring back the ark of our God, for we neglected it during the reign of Saul. The whole assembly agreed to this, for the people could see that it was the right thing to do. So clearly this is in David's reign as king now. So he's been made king. He's gone through that civil war at the beginning of his reign, and now he's king. So David summoned all Israel, from the Shihor brook of Egypt in the south all the way to the town of Lebo Hamath in the north, to join in bringing the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. Then David and all Israel went to Bala of Judah, also called Kiriath Jearim, to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord, who is enthroned between the cherubim. Interesting, it says bear the name of the Lord. There's a note on that. Verse 6. Or the ark of God, where the name is proclaimed. The name. Okay, so the ark doesn't bear the name. It doesn't seem to bear the name. It bears the presence of God, or a reminder of him. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart. David and all Israel were celebrating before God with all their might, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he had laid his hand on the ark. So Uzzah died there in the presence of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named the place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of God, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God back into my care?" So David did not move the ark into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom in Gath. The ark of God remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he owned. So this is a retelling of the story we clearly had in Samuel. Not much has been added to it. So why did God strike out at Uzzah? It's because David's moving the ark wrong. In the books of Moses, they give prescription on how to move the ark, and it should be carried by the Levites and the priests on poles, not on a cart of oxen. And they need to do it in the right way, showing the proper respect for the ark as the Lord laid out. Even though David had his heart in the right place, he still did not do the right thing in this case. So chapter 14. Then King Hiram of Tyre sent messengers to David, along with cedar timber, and stonemasons and carpenters, to build him a palace. And David realized that the Lord had confirmed him as king over Israel and had greatly blessed his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. Then David married more wives in Jerusalem, and they had more sons and daughters. These are the names of David's sons who were born in Jerusalem: Shemua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Elpalet, Noga, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Elida, and Eliphelet. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, they mobilized all their forces to capture him. But David was told they were coming, so he marched out to meet them. The Philistines arrived and made a raid in the valley of Rephaim. So David asked God, "Should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me?" The Lord replied, "Yes, go ahead, and I will hand them over to you." So David and his troops went up to the Baal Perazim and defeated the Philistines there. "God did it," David exclaimed. "He used me to burst through my enemies like a raging flood." So they named the place Baal Perazim, which means the Lord who bursts through. The Philistines had abandoned their gods there, so David gave orders to burn them. But after a while, the Philistines returned and raided the valley again. And once again, David asked God what to do. "Do not attack them straight on," God replied. "Instead, circle around behind and attack them near the poplar trees. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, go out and attack. That will be the signal that God is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army." So David did what God commanded, and they struck down the Philistine army all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. So David's fame spread everywhere, and the Lord caused all the nations to fear David. So this is obviously a bit of a summary. We're breezing through David's reign here. There's more explanation in Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Especially this incident here with the sound of feet in the poplar trees. I think the explanation from in the Samuels is that the Philistines heard this and fled, and they thought the army was much bigger than it really was, and turned on each other probably again. So there you go. So we're continuing on the story of David here. It's really interesting. It is a lot of repeat. I keep looking for things they didn't mention the last time through, and I'm sure we'll come across a few. So if you saw something that we didn't read in Samuel that's interesting and noteworthy, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear and see what I missed, because obviously I'm reading it through rather quickly, like every day. But I'd be really interested to see exactly what the difference are between the two sections. We'll put a plug in there today and move forward into our psalm. So today we're reading Psalm 129. We're continuing on the Psalms of Ascent for a pilgrimage into Jerusalem. So Psalm 129, a song for pilgrims ascending to Jerusalem. From my earliest youth, my enemies have persecuted me. Let all Israel repeat this. From my earliest youth, my enemies have persecuted me, but they have never defeated me. My back is covered with cuts, as if a farmer had plowed long furrows. But the Lord is good. He has cut me free from the ropes of the ungodly. May all who hate Jerusalem be turned back in shameful defeat. May they be as useless as grass on a rooftop, turning yellow and when only half grown. Ignored by the harvester, despised by the binder, and may those who pass by refuse to give them this blessing. The Lord bless you. We bless you in the Lord's name. So this is interesting. Talking about from my earliest youth, I've been persecuted. My enemies have persecuted me. And then it repeats it. From my earliest youth, my enemies have persecuted me, but they have never defeated me. It talks about the struggles, backs covered with cuts, and just abused and beaten and hurt, but never defeated. That's so cool. God gets through everything. And then, of course, may all who hate Jerusalem be turned back in shameful defeat. And then it talks about how terrible those people should be, how terrible their lives should be if they hate Jerusalem. And so it kind of reflects that whole pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and keep talking about Jerusalem on this pilgrimage as they approach it. So very, very interesting. All right, let's flip forward into our gospel. So Luke chapter 8, verse 26 through 39. So Jesus has just calmed the storm, and his disciples are afraid of him and amazed. And so when they arrive on the other side of the lake, this story happens. So they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes, across the lake from Galilee. As Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. For a long time he had been homeless and naked, living in a cemetery outside the town. As soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down in front of him. Then he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. This spirit had often taken control of the man. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and rushed out into the wilderness completely under the demon's power. Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, for he was filled with many demons. The demons kept begging Jesus not to send them into the bottomless pit. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby, and the demons begged him to let them enter into the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw it, they fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been freed from the demons. He was sitting at Jesus' feet, fully clothed and perfectly sane. And they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others how the demon-possessed man had been healed, and all the people in the region of the Gerasenes begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone, for a great wave of fear swept over them. So Jesus returned to the boat and left, crossing back to the other side of the lake. The man who had been freed from the demons begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him home, saying, "No, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you." So he went all through the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. This is a really cool story because we've read it before, and there's a little bit of a twist on this one. The demons know Jesus, we've figured this out before. The demons seem to know things and proclaim things like you are the Son of God. And they're under the authority of Jesus. Jesus can tell them where to go and what to do. And the people around Jesus see this. Now, this demon-possessed man has been in this community his entire life. He's a staple in the community. They all know him and they're all afraid of him because he can't be controlled. He breaks whatever chains they put on him, and he's dangerous. When they see him sitting humbly like a kitten before Jesus' feet, they're automatically afraid of Jesus. They can't fathom the amount of power and authority that would be required to tame and cure this man who's been full of demons all his entire life. And so the whole region's afraid of him. So what does Jesus do? He tells the man, even though he wants to leave, to stay. Tell his family what happened. And the longer the man stays, and the longer the people realize that he is back to normal and that the exorcism of the demons has worked and has stayed, and he continues to serve God and serve Jesus, their fear of Jesus will be lessened. Despite them having more respect for the staying power of his authority, I think they'll be softened because this man is going to be in their community. Having been this fear point in their community will now be a point of hope for them. And I think there's a really good reason God told that man to stay in that community. And we do run into him later on. I don't know if we'll do so in Luke, but we have in other books when Jesus returns here. Okay, so let's flip over from our gospel to our epistles into Colossians, chapter 3, verses 1 through 14. So we've been reading in Colossians or Paul's been teaching about following Christ and following the way truly, and not following these extra rules or extra ideas that people have about Jesus or about the way to serve him. He's talking about following specific rules or dietary restrictions or circumcision or various Jewish traditions. And he's talking about how we should just be serving Jesus and following Jesus and not all these other rules. And now we're going to continue on in that in chapter 3. Since you have been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven, where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. And when Christ, who is your life, is revealed to the whole world, you will share in all his glory. So put to death the sinful, earthly things lurking within you. Have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Because of these sins, the anger of God is coming. You used to do these things when your life was still part of this world. But now is the time to get rid of anger, rage, malicious behavior, slander, and dirty language. Don't lie to each other, for you have stripped off your old sinful nature and all its wicked deeds. Put on your new nature to be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you are a Jew or a Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave, or free. Christ is all that matters, and he lives in all of us. Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults, and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. So, yesterday, it was don't follow these stringent rules. Don't try and work out your own righteousness by trying to be holy by withholding things from yourself or following these obscure bylaws of the Jewish faith. Then we had this question, okay, well then are there things we should and shouldn't do at all? Is there really anything that's really sinful for us to do? Today we get the answer to that, right? So he's saying, you have to follow Christ. And in following Christ, there are things that you should do, right? Thinking about the things of heaven, not of this earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. So put to death your sinful earthly things lurking within you, and have nothing to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Don't be greedy. Every greedy person is an idolater. It talks about these things that we shouldn't do. So there are still rules. There are still sinful deeds that we should avoid. There are good and useful attitudes that we should have, right? Putting on tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. There are a way that we should live. It isn't a free-for-all. It isn't, oh, God has saved me. Jesus has forgiven my sins. Now I can go do whatever I want, for nothing is a sin anymore. There are branches of Christian thought, or those who claim to follow Christ, who live like that because they believe that. That's not the way it is. We're putting on a new nature, and our nature has a way of being. It has a way that it functions. And if we go against that new nature, we will be shrugging it off again and taking up our sinful nature that we should have left behind. That new nature does not have anything to do with sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Many things. There's a bunch of these little lists within the epistles of things you definitely shouldn't do. And there's these lists of things you definitely should do. And we should pay attention to them. And not necessarily the minutia of the list, but the attitude behind it. Right? If this thought, or this action, or this deed goes against the glorious nature of Jesus, you shouldn't be doing it. If your action glorifies him and edifies the church and causes us to fulfill his commands to love one another and to serve one another and proclaim his gospel, then those things are good. We should be learning about these things for ourselves. There are descriptions of them, examples of them, which are still true and are accurate for everyone. But we should be able to, at the very least, figure them out for ourselves as well. I think that's what it's saying. Let me know what you think it's saying. Are these just the new laws? That's a way to think about it. The things that Paul is talking about, this is the new instructions. Don't do this, do this. And we should do our best to follow these laws. Or is he talking about the attitudes that we should have? And the attitudes will produce the fruit of us not following these things or doing these things, and rather doing better things. It's all about the relationship and the change in your person. When you meet Jesus and you choose to follow him, you should change. I'm not saying that you should be a different person than you are, so follow Jesus. I'm saying follow Jesus and you will find that you're changing. You will have different desires. You will have different wants and needs. And you will recognize those things that harm God or hurt God and harm those around you, and you won't do them anymore. Instead, you will find those things that edify yourself, God, the church, and the people around you, and you will start doing those more. That's what a relationship with Jesus should do. And that's, I think, what Paul is trying to say here. So we're clearly not done. In Colossians, there's lots more to say. I mean, the next verse is "and," so it's a continuation of the thought. So we'll continue that tomorrow, and we'll see what he says there. So if you have any thoughts on this or any other section that we've read today, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments down below, and let me know what you think, and we can have some more discussion there. And if you don't have a profile and you can't do that, then talk with those around you about it, or just think about it, and then we'll continue on our thoughts tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, and we will see you all again tomorrow. God bless.